Hello and welcome to Property TV's Property Question Time. My name's Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have all of your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. Joining me today are John Howard, developer, mentor, author and generally good chap. Welcome, John.
Stephen, it's very kind of you to say so. Not many property developers get that accolade.
Well, perhaps not many deserve it.
That's very true, thank you.
There we are.
I'll take it.
Okay, and joining us by Zoom from Bordeaux is Joanna Leggett, who is co-founder of Leggett Immobilier, who are French property experts and property advisors. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, Stephen. Nice to see you again.
John, you're first with the question, and the question is this. There is now a relaxation of planning laws which permits much more easily the conversion of office buildings into residential. Do the experts think that with the new and increasing desire to work from home, there will be much more of this type of conversion? And given that in some cases there's a lack of surrounding infrastructure, is it a good idea? And is it the answer to our high street crisis? There you go.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because this morning I was on a call with an MP, I won't say which one, regarding something we're trying to put together which will get older people back into town centres, and we're going for some funding on it, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I would say, obviously, especially in London and big cities, there's going to be more office accommodation to be converted into residential. The new Class E, which we believe from July will include things like nurseries, school nurseries that is, and different buildings will be in Class E, and all those will be able to be converted under PD rights. So the government have decided that converting commercial to residential is the way forward in terms of city centres and town centres, and I think it's pretty obvious really that if they can be converted relatively cheaply compared to new build, then it's a sensible thing to do. The most things you've got to be careful, the biggest thing you've got to be careful of is that it's not in too much of an industrial or commercial area. If it is in those areas, you need to know that there's other buildings round that are going to be converted too. Otherwise, what happens is you may be able to get the funding to convert it, but if you want to refinance it or if you want to sell the units off individually, some building societies might say it's too commercial. So before you start, just get your broker to talk to a few building societies and lending institutions and check whether or not it would be it's in a suitable area for residential. Because even if you can do it, doesn't mean you always should. So be careful. And the other two things I always quickly say is doesn't matter so much if there's no parking, because under PD rights you don't need it. But what you do need is cycle stores and bin stores. And if you've got no land outside your building, where on earth are you going to put bins? And where on earth are you going to put cycles? Cycles can go inside sometimes. Some councils want one for one. Some councils want two cycle spaces per flat, and that's a lot of room used up.
Well, yeah, John, just talk to me about the practicalities of it, though. Let's take, say, Oxford Street in London. I know you're going to tell me off for being too London-centric again, aren't
yes,
you?
As always.
But look, so let's take Debenhams. We've got the Debenhams store. That's going to close now. Now, what are the alternatives? You can divide it into much smaller shops, but of course then the institutional landlords aren't going to be interested in those tenancies, are they? So it's going to be hard to fund. So all right, so you look at converting it. I quite like your premise of having older people's homes in the high street. I think that's eminently sensible, mainly because they don't need cars, they don't need a lot of outside space, and it's easy maintenance.
The other thing, Stephen, is what I'm trying to promote on that is that also it releases family homes for young families. Because there's people stuck in these houses, and I'm talking local authority houses to a great extent here, and housing association properties, which actually, they're using one bedroom out of three.
Sure.
So that's my premise on that.
But the logistics of this are fine. I understand you can put older people in a location like the Debenhams store if you could convert it, but converting it's a hugely difficult problem in itself, isn't it? The building is not going to be it's not going to be suitable for conversion as is. It's probably going to need to be demolished and a fresh build put in place. Do you not think?
No, well, I'm a bit conversion mad in as much that most of my developments over the years, not all of them, have been conversions. So, I mean, I don't think actually your example is a very good one, with all due respect. The reason I say that is Oxford Street. So whatever you do with it, it's one of the most famous addresses in the world. That's why you used to live just around the corner, I believe. So what I'm saying is, you know, you can do all sorts of things with that building, which you can't do probably in I don't know. I don't want to be rude to Sunderland or somewhere, Blackpool or wherever it might be, or down south somewhere, Torquay or whatever. I don't know. So what I'm saying is the values of those apartments are going to be so much that actually you can afford to do quite a lot with that building to make it residential savvy, if you like.
But it's a huge logistical problem trying to build on a high street like that.
Yeah, of course there is, and it's more expensive because you've got nowhere for skips. And that's one thing I would say, if you're looking to do something in town centres, to develop offices right in the town centres into residential, you do have a problem with skips, parking. You know, all these guys and girls who work on the site need to get there, and they need to be able to park somewhere properly, and so on. So, you know, you do have to take that into account. It will be more expensive because you can only work certain times of the day. You can't work at night. You know, roads might be blocked off.
Has that not changed though now in terms of working hours?
Well, I think it's got a bit easier the last few months. I mean, I said I was in Mayfair early and Sloane Square earlier today, and my goodness, I
was listening to the piling here on Sunday. So.
Well, that's interesting because I'm surprised they're allowed to do that on a Sunday. So.
But, you know, it is interesting how times change. I mean, I know 2 years ago here on Property TV, we interviewed the developer of a building in Oxford Street, which is being converted to residential. And I was thinking at the time, is this the right place to have residential on the further end of Oxford Street? And I thought, no, it's not right. I think my views changed. I think it was a very, very far-sighted and good idea.
Yeah, I think what's happening to these city centres, they're going to become small residential, almost villages in themselves. So mainly for an older community and a younger community, because people with families aren't going to want to live there, but younger people will, and older people should be. Older people aren't really yet, but I think they will. And I think that absolutely. There's nothing wrong with converting commercial into residential in the city centres, but it only suits, you know, a section of the public.
But I think it's a great idea, and we should also remember that, you know, even in the last 20 or 30 years, the agility of the elder generation is far, far better than it was 25 years ago or 30 years ago.
For sure, it's all changed.
So times do change. Yeah. OK, John, thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Joanna, we're over to you now. What are the biggest differences between buying a property in France now compared to when the UK was part of the European Union?
To be honest, there's not that much difference in buying a property in France. The sales procedure is always going to be the same, and it was for, you know, Americans, South Africans, and other nationalities outside of the EU. So it's still quite a straightforward process. You come and look for your property, you find your property, you put in an offer. You know, if the vendor agrees, then we draw up the compromise de vente, which is the exchange of contracts, which could be done within a week. And then it goes through the notaire until the final act, which is generally 3 months later. So realistically, the whole sales process is exactly the same. The only difference is now that we will have to have residency cards if you're buying a permanent home and you need to live there. But again, it's quite a simple process to apply for those residency cards. I've just had to do it myself. Obviously, if you were here before the 31st of December, and we have a lot of Brits living in France at the moment looking to buy, but they're renting, it's quite straightforward. However, coming now, sort of from January, and this year, you just need to fill in a form online at the government site. Again, very straightforward, saying that you're making a permanent move to France. You may need to show that you can support yourselves. At the moment, they're looking at you being able to prove that you earn €12,000 a year. And as long as you can show that, whether that's a pension or an early retirement pension, or you're working in some form, or you're getting monies from somewhere, whether that's savings, etc., you just need to be able to prove your income, your passport, give your passport details, proof of your address, and that's all you need to do. And then that goes to the prefecture, which is like the town hall. And then, a few months later, you'll just be asked for an appointment to go in for fingerprints, which they take now, and that's it. And then now, if you've been in France before, you may have got a carte séjour, which would last for maybe 5 years or 10 years. If you're new to France as a resident, it'll probably last for 1 year, and then you'll renew it again at the end of the year, and then you'll get a 5-year one and then a 10-year one after that.
Okay, Joanna, thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. Join us after the break. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. Joining me are John Howard. John, welcome back. And Joanna, welcome to you too. John, your second question. The government this week allowed a question in Parliament about the plight of leaseholders in relation to the costs and implications for leaseholders of unsafe buildings relating to fire eggs. However, Conservative MPs were instructed to abstain. The EWS1 certificate is, however, being withheld at this time for many other issues other than just flammable cladding. For instance, the provision of tiered balconies, perhaps with wooden decking. What's the answer to these problems and who should bear the cost?
How long have we got, Stephen?
I could tell you precisely, but just have a go.
So first of all, EWS stands for External Survey Walls. EWS, no it doesn't. EWS.
External Wall
External
Surveys.
Wall Surveys.
Yeah, there we
right.
go.
So
having clarified that.
Absolutely, let's get it right. So every high-rise building in the UK should have by now have a survey done on it to say exactly what the situation with the external cladding is. That's what it's about. And it's about not just the cladding, it's about fire breaks at each level. It's about the wooden balconies or even slatted wood on the balconies. All these things have to be taken into account. Now, the difficulty there is not everyone is at fault here. The government aren't at fault particularly, the local authority, certainly the owners of the flats aren't at fault, and quite often the developers aren't either. Because what's happened is, as time has gone by, fire assessments have improved and sophistication has taken over in terms of what is allowed and not allowed. What we know now is more flammable than was before. So the building regulations has changed. So what was 10 or 15 years ago absolutely fine, passed every regulation, would not now pass the regulations. So who is liable to pay? Now, there's been a number of organisations spring up from leaseholders who are basically saying that there should be a levy on every developer. Well, we've just developed a block of 150 flats, up-to-date combustible cladding, no problems whatsoever with it at all within the new regs. So should I be paying a levy because another developer hasn't done their job right or did do their job right 15 years ago and now it's a problem? It is a nightmare situation. You could argue, and I'm not one who would argue this, but you could argue that if you bought a flat or even a house and it needs a new roof, you're liable for it.
Let's just take this stage by stage. So, person buys their flat on a long lease, they're responsible to the freeholder. Now, you know and I know that in the world of property development, as often as not, the developer will ring fence that development by use of a limited company
Absolutely.
or offshore
Yep.
company or whatever.
Yep.
And that company will be dissolved on
Yes.
completion and the freehold will be sold off to an investor.
Yes.
Now, so in real terms, that investor in the freehold, assuming that it is separate from the
Yep.
original developer, actually has got the same argument as the tenant. why should I pay? I bought in good faith.
Yep.
He's bought in good faith.
Yep.
So then you transfer the liability, let's go further down the line, to the actual construction company. That might be totally different from the developer.
I agree, yes.
You know, so does the buck stop there? I'm not sure, because if that constructor has complied with local authority planning regulations, submitted all his papers correctly.
And what I would say, Steve, we're not talking about a Grenfell situation. Grenfell is a grave disaster, and the people that were involved in Grenfell, the construction, took shortcuts, and that is now, we can say that because that's been proved in court.
That's coming out.
So and they put the wrong cladding on there, so it was combustible over 4 stories high. So that is totally different, and they need to be, whatever's going to happen to them will happen to them, and that's probably right. That's very, very different to most blocks in the UK.
Yeah, but you see, John, you're coming back to to where does the buck stop, and the simple fact is that actually you can take it all the way back to government, because you can say the government at the time should have been alert to this and should have been stricter on building controls with the local councils. But then, where you've got the issue there, this is essentially a leasehold problem. Leasehold is really pretty peculiar to London in itself.
Well, you say that.
In volume.
In volume,
yeah.
you say that. In most, in every city and town in the UK, there's a high-rise block.
There is.
High-rise is, anything high-rise considered over 6 stories.
There is, but let me just make the point here that because of the volume in London, people here would probably readily accept some kind of levy, either payable by the taxpayer via the government to the leaseholders to help with the costs, or by lending institutions, or some kind of guarantee or fixed term loan. But in the rest of the country, I can see a lot of people would say, I don't think it's right that taxpayers' money should be spent protecting somebody else's
Well,
property.
of course, any government subsidy is taxpayers' money. That's the first thing. So, but what I would say, in certain parts of London, if the lessees have got to pay, 30,000-40,000 pounds, and the block's worth $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, with all due respect, they've probably had a big uplift in value, and most of them can either refinance or they can pay cash. So I agree with you. There are different issues and problems here. If you're in Nottingham, if you're in Hull, if you're in Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester, or wherever, that's very different. The flat might be worth 125,000.
So, John, let me just press you. Where does the buck stop?
Well, ultimately, every buck stops with the government. Ultimately, because they set the laws and they set, all the restrictions and so on. I think they're going to come out shortly. Robert Jenrick is going to come out shortly with what to do. I think they've made a big of a pig's ear of it so far. I just think they didn't realise how big a problem it probably was. They put a fund together to start with, which was totally inadequate, and also so difficult to apply for the funds that hardly any block managed to do so. So it's all changing. I think my gut feeling is they're going to have to subsidise this work. And of course, for everybody who's got a problem, there's someone else who's going to benefit from it.
Well,
as we know.
John, my final question to you on this, I'm glad to have you here today as a developer, because we can exhaust this. Do you think there are some people making, well, first of all, let me say, I don't want to belittle or in any way compromise the thoughts about Grenfell and the sadness of that whole
Dreadful,
issue.
yeah.
But in terms of these safety certificates and some of the things that are being pulled out of the bag as problems, do you think there's people making a bit of a career out of this?
Of course, as we just said, for every sad disaster there is for certain people, there's someone else benefiting quite often. And here you've got the management companies of these blocks. They can charge 10 or 15% on top of what it's costing to put them right under the terms of the lease, because they're going to manage that situation, so they can make 10 or 15% on it. You've got overcladders. We've used just a really big overcladding company recently, and I think they said they're now booked up for 3 or 4 years. So if you want to do another development, you've got a problem, because you probably won't get a cladding company unless you're going to pay way over the odds to come and do your block for you.
Yeah.
So there's lots of people that are going to benefit from this.
Okay.
Unfortunately, probably.
Now, to our viewers, if you have any stories or interesting comment on this, do let us know. We're always pleased to hear from you. Joanna, your second question. Now that the Brexit transition period has ended and a deal has been made,
yes,
yes, what is the buying? What is the process of buying in France now that those changes have taken place? Especially if I only want to use it as a holiday home.
Well, it's going to be different for holiday homeowners now, because in the past you could spend, if you were a British UK resident or a taxpayer, tax fiscal resident in the UK, then you could spend under 183 days in France at any one time. What's changed now, if you're buying a holiday home, it's different to if you're becoming a resident, but buying a holiday home, you're only allowed to stay now in periods of 3 months. And that includes anywhere in Europe. So if you came to France for a month, went to Spain for a month and Italy for a month, you would then need to return. So it's not just France and then you could go to Spain for a month and then come back to France. You are only allowed to do it in 3-month spurts now. So that has affected a little bit the holiday home market, where we have a lot of clients that buy and they might stay in France for 6 months and then spend 6 months in the UK. Maybe come for the summer and go back in the winter. So that's going to change. However, it doesn't mean that you can't come for 6 months. You can, but you just need to apply for a long-term visa. And again, we thought that was going to be quite tricky. But we've looked at the government site, which is in English. You can get all the information in English, and you literally just put in, if you own a property in France, that you want to stay in your property for longer than 3 months, and it's quite a straightforward procedure. And we're hoping that it is, they're just going to allow people to come and spend time in their holiday home, which I'm sure they will, because France has a huge tourist industry. It's 82 million tourists visit France a year. A lot of those are Brits. So, they are going to be encouraging Brits to still come and still spend money in their country. So, I think it's not going to be a problem. But at the moment, it's quite a simple process. You just apply for a long-term visa to extend your 3 months that you are actually allowed. So you're allowed 3 months in every 90 days. So you can come for 6 months, but you have to come for 3, go back for 3, come back for 3, unless you apply for the visa.
Okay, thank you. Joanna, what are the important time thresholds for using the house as a holiday home? For example, would there be any tax or permit implications for using the home only at certain times of the year? No,
that you'll still have to pay exactly the same as if you were living here on your holiday home. So if the holiday home is furnished, whether anyone's staying in it or not, you still have to pay tax habitation. If it's inhabitable and you've bought it as a rec and you're going to be doing it up, and there's no heating or there's no windows, and you're going to be doing it up over a period of time, and you're only coming as a holiday home, then you wouldn't have to pay the tax habitation because it's inhabitable. But the minute it becomes habitable, then you pay the tax habitation and you pay the tax foncière, and that's what everybody in France that owns a house in France has to pay. They're the 2 local taxes, one for living and one for the land tax. And they'd be the same for everyone. So it's no different to whether you're a French citizen or a British citizen or an American. We all pay the same in tax.
Well, that's all we've got time for today in our programme. So thanks to John Howard, property developer. Thank you very much, John.
And I expect you're relieved I behaved myself regarding Brexit as well.
Well, you did indeed, and we've discussed some fairly complex issues today, so yeah. I hope our viewers find that helpful. Joanna, thank you very much indeed. Joanna Leggett from Leggett Immobilier. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me next time on Property Question Time.